series. This sequence contains interviews about piping that were either edited or deleted from the original film series.
The stories of how the pipes actually gee the soldiers up when the chips are down. The sound of the pipes is the one thing. It's rather emotional subject, I suppose, but it just gives them the adrenaline and makes them perform that much better. And it's part of their life.
In the Highland Regiment, the pipers are always well respected. The dutymen, the soldiers, thought a lot of their pipers. Didn't give tuppence for the bandsmen. I was quite well known because I was very smart and I always had managed a big moustache. And the young soldiers did, you know, always thought, this is great, you see. I was always known as Big Eric. And then there was two friends of mine. There was a fellow McPhee, big man. He'd been heavyweight boxing champion of the 1st Battalion when he was only a boy of 17. And he was loved, but he was always in trouble, but the men loved him. Yes, there was. I can think of when I was in China. That, of course, a piper had to be a wee bit. He was expected to be a slightly better type, you know. He was expected always to be smart and well dressed. Although he make his name maybe by getting drunk and that sort of thing and having trouble with the guard, there was never anything disreputable about him. If the troops didn't like that. You know, the pipers by and large lived up to their image. They had a certain status in the battalion.
We had a lot of pipers, Stewarts. The Stewarts were hereditary pipers of the Gordons, and we had a lot of them. We had several Stewarts in our band. They weren't smart people at all. They were ignorant. They couldn't read nor write or anything like that, but they could play the pipes, but they couldn't write their own name. No.
Spud bashing was always hated. And occasionally pipers would be taken for that, and they didn't like it. And the soldiers didn't like to see a piper peeling spuds. And one day, in Jamaica, I think it was, the colonel was riding through barracks one afternoon. He saw a couple of blue bonnets in the cookhouse peeling spuds. And he created hell about it. And we never did peeling after that. I know there was a certain... You were accorded a certain status and you were expected to live up to it. Getting drunk wasn't a crime.
The men liked the pipes. When you played the pipes, they were happy. Made them feel good. And they knew all the tunes, you see, too. They could sing the tunes when you were playing.
Always march the colours off parade to blue bonnets. And then the fall in. We had a different fall in the morning from what we had in the afternoon, funnily enough. In the morning of a morning's parade, we played Peter O'Donnell. But an afternoon's parade, we played the Athol Highlanders, or another name for it is the Gathering of the Grahams. Don't know what. And then on active service, we played a different lights out from what we did in peacetime. When you moved to a troop ship was packed with people. You were issued with a small kit bag called a sea kit bag, a small thing, and the stuff you needed on the voyage was in that. Your main kit bags were all stuffed into the hold. So were your equipments and rifles. And the troop ship was loaded in the good old-fashioned way of the chain. And there'd be a line of men all the way along the quayside, right up the gangway, right along the deck, right down into the hold. And all the rifles would be passed up, all the kit bags would be passed up. Well, the pipes and drums and military band always played during this fatigue. But as I said, when we were in the south of England, strength was very low, and so the military man didn't play. They were put onto this thing in the chain. And there was one case where they were, so all the drummers were put on the job too and left the pipers only, but the pipers were never taken for this thing. The pipers were left to play during the loading of the troop ship. And it lasted for a long time. When the war broke out, all the pipers went to their jobs as pioneers, anti-gas personnel, and then there were just the 6 pipers went on active service. And of these 6 pipers, none survived. 5 of them were killed in action. I don't know why they should have been there anyway, but they were killed in action. And the pipe major, a fellow called McCallum, he was evacuated to Kuala Lumpur Hospital with malaria and was never seen again. We don't know what happened. But all the pipers disappeared. And then of the pipers that were in the gas platoon, most of them died as POWs. There weren't many pipers came out alive.
Jock Laidlaw had a proud family tradition to live up to. His uncle, Daniel Laidlaw, had won the Victoria Cross piping his battalion over the top at the Battle of Luce in 1915. During the Second World War, Jock was fighting the Japanese in Burma.
When you were a company piper, you had to carry your pipes with you all the time. You didn't carry them in a case. You had a canvas back which you carried over your shoulder. And being in a hot climate, it played havoc with the pipes. And if you were suddenly asked to get your pipes out, you'd make a dive for the cookhouse or something to get some syrup to season the bag. So we always kept in well with the cooks in the battalion, because you couldn't get seasoning out of there. We just had to use syrup.
This is the background to all these stories of piping heroism, and very moving they are too. To the layman, it sounds just as if he'd picked up a bugle and blown. But to the piper, it's how they kept their instruments in order and how they knew they were going to respond. That's the interesting thing. It shows that they must have carried spare reeds about them. They must have looked after the pipes in some way during the night when it was raining, either covered them with a blanket or greatcoat or something. But this is the background to all these piping stories.
I remember I was playing at I think it was St Andrew's night. They were more popular abroad than Burns night. St Andrew's night in northern India. And the chief for the evening was a judge. And one of our officers had to nudge him to remind him to for the piper to have a toast. I was standing there waiting. Oh yes, and this judge, who was well over, reached out and grabbed a small brandy goblet and filled it with whiskey. And the horror, all pipers are expected to drink whiskey, and pipe majors are expected to drink neat whiskey. And the horror is when you get this neat whiskey, well, I hope it's good stuff and not fiery stuff, because you have a horror of having your breath caught or being made to cough or splutter. And you've got to control this. You've got to drink it down like a man in one gulp, turn it over and kiss the bottom and put the empty glass down. And this was up, really filled this glass up. And I said to myself, gosh, my hair stood on end, wondering what was going to happen. But fortunately, I think it was Drambuie he filled it with, which went down quite easily.
And the CO came round and says, look, the Japanese are cleared out the village. All is clear. The village is surrounded by us. I want you and Piper McRae to go into the village with your pipes, play through the village, and sort of cheer the inhabitants up a bit. So we did that. Of course, we met the village headman, and of course he came out with drinks for the 2 pipers. And never thinking, of course, we took a drink. but we didn't think it was as strong as it was. We came back to our lines, but I knew nothing for 2 days after it. I was out for the count. And I got a ticking off from the CO. And he said then, he says, if it hadn't been that I had sent you in there, he said, it'd been a court-martial.
A piper in the Seaforths was a man called Donald MacLeod, who was an outstanding piper and composer, and a very bright little chap. He was quite small, but he was captured with the 2nd Seaforth at St Valery in June of 1940, and he escaped. And he made his way back to Fort George all by himself, and he never told anybody how he had done it. But one day he turned up in Fort George, and he became pipe major of the 7th Seaforth, and it was his ambition to play the battalion into the attack, into the assault. His commanding officer was Colonel Peter Hunt, who realised that in Donald MacLeod, Scotland had a musician of outstanding quality, so he steadfastly refused to let Donald play the troops or into the attack in the Second World War, as it was called. And Donald tried hard to circumvent this, but he was always caught and sent back. However, when they crossed the Rhine in March 1945, Colonel Hunt allowed Donald to play. So Donald played in the prow of the landing craft as they went over the Rhine River, playing Caberfay and Seaforth tunes. He played the March of the Cameron Men because Colonel Hunt was a Cameron. And so wee Donald got his chance to play in action at last.
Say we were marching towards Mandalay. We were up the side of the Irrawaddy, and we were advancing on a village just outside Mandalay at the time. And as we kept advancing, we hadn't made any contact with the Japanese, so the company commander gave me a shout. He says, get the pipes struck up. Maybe they'll hear us or see us then, and we'll find out where they are. And that was the start of playing in that action, where I played the regimental march, the people could Honolulu. And by the time I'd finished, of course, we made contact with the Japs. You could hear the bullets whistling past. And that was it. I'd done my bit. I'd been told to do it. I did it.
Did you think that was your duty to do that?
Oh, yes, yes. Yes, certainly.
What was the... you learnt after that you were the... What was it you told me?
Well, I'm on record as being the last piper to play troops into action during the Second World War.